Let's get right to our top story. It's dominating the headlines this morning. The storm over a controversial memo from Republicans in Congress, which accuses officials in the FBI and in the Department of Justice of abusing their power in the Russia investigation.
Now, this is a layered story. We are going to unpack it for you throughout the morning. Overnight, the president who agreed to declassify that memo, he arrived in Florida at Mar-a-Lago. He is facing uproar from Democrats who say the memo omits facts and may ultimately be used as motivation for Trump to fire the Justice Department official that's overseeing the Russia investigation.
Our political analyst and law enforcement analyst, they're both standing by. But first, let's take a closer look at what exactly is in this memo with ABC's David Wright, who's near Mar-a-Lago in Florida. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan and Paula. The release of this secret memo has caused a political firestorm. And while it may not contain the bombshell promised by House Republicans, the memo and the politics surrounding its release could have some major fallout for the Russia investigation.
I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. A lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that.
President Trump has made it crystal clear what he thinks of the memo.
This now is the biggest abuse of power, corruption case in American history.
The Democrats say it's the president and his allies who are playing politics.
The goal was simply to get a misleading piece of information before the public, help support the president, help discredit the Mueller investigation and the FBI.
The Republican memo specifically seeks to discredit the man who appointed special counsel Bob Mueller and oversees the Russia investigation, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. According to the memo, Rosenstein endorsed the continued eavesdropping of Carter Page, a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign and a suspected Russian agent. An essential part of a warrant application he signed, according to the memo, was the infamous Russian dossier paid for by the Democrats and compiled by a former British spy, Christopher Steele.
The dossier was presented to the court as if it was true. The court was not told that the Democrats actually paid for this.
The question is, did this dossier lead to create this investigation?
Democrats worry the president is looking for an excuse to fire Rosenstein in order to short-circuit the Russia investigation.
The firing of Rod Rosenstein, in my view, would be an act of obstruction of justice, just as firing Bob Mueller would be.
The president was asked about it point blank. His cryptic answer?
You figure that one out.
The release of the memo puts the president at odds with his own FBI director, who opposed releasing it. Chris Wray sent a video message to the agency's rank and file telling them, quote, "I stand by our shared determination to do our work independently and by the book." Now, the former Trump advisor who's at the center of all this, Carter Page, says the Republican memo vindicates him. He denies he was ever a Russian spy. But the Democrats are crying foul. They say what the Republicans have done here is cherry-pick certain details to come up with a narrative favorable to the president. They say that on Monday, they're going to renew their calls to release a counter memo that rebuts this Republican memo point by point. Dan and Paula?
Yeah, the story is far from over. David, thank you. We want to continue this conversation. As we said, there's a lot to unpack here. We're going to bring in former FBI agent Brad Garrett and political analyst Matthew Dowd. This first question, I want both of you to answer. But guys, let's get right to the core allegation of the memo that in the thick of the campaign, the Justice Department, the FBI, used information that was in part bought and paid for by the Clinton campaign to spy on someone, Carter Page, associated with Team Trump. If true, isn't that a problem? Brad, let's begin with you.
Of course it's a problem if that were true, but let me explain something. You don't have the luxury of picking where your sourcing information comes from. Most of the time it is bias, but the point being, can you corroborate it? Just because it's biased doesn't mean it's not true. I will tell you, based on experience, that getting wiretaps approved, you have to have layers and layers of corroboration to get both the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the judge to sign a wiretap order. So the idea that it was just based on a dossier is just silly.
All right, Matt.
Well, to me, this thing, I mean, obviously we should raise questions about how these FISA applications are done in the course of this, but like in life or in politics or in marketing, the best thing you can do is undersell and overdeliver. What the Republicans have done and Chairman Nunes have done is oversell and underdeliver. Well, last time we saw something like this is when Geraldo Rivera revealed Al Capone's vault. And what we have here is very little evidence of a problem. And in the end, this doesn't raise any questions about the Mueller probe.
So let me pick up on that, Matt, because critics say this memo may be used as a pretext for the president to fire Rod Rosenstein. He is the Deputy Attorney General in charge of the Russia probe. He's the only man right now who can fire the special counsel, Robert Mueller. The White House insists there are no plans to fire Rosenstein. But if the president were to go ahead and do that, what do you think the consequences would be politically?
Well, that's what I think this memo is all about. There really is no legal questions that this memo is somehow really substantively argued for. It's really a political memo. And the political memo is, in the short term, it can muddy the waters, but also it can provide Donald Trump, the president, with some evidence in his mind of how he can circumvent the Mueller investigation. As I said earlier, this memo raises no questions about the credibility of Bob Mueller investigating the Russian collusion or other issues related to that, but it can muddy the waters and put Donald Trump in the position of being able to, for him to politically try to short-circuit the investigation.
I mean, you're talking about this already, but I want to drill down on it a little bit. This story is so complicated. It involves names that are not household names. Rod Rosenstein, Carter Page. It's confusing even for me, and I get paid to follow this stuff. Do you think in the end the Republicans have succeeded in creating sort of generalized doubt and suspicion that serves to undermine the entire Russia probe?
Well, the unfortunate thing is I think the Republicans have succeeded in undermining two branches of government that were the last vestiges of credibility in the American public, which is the FBI, which the country desperately needs to investigate all kinds of crimes, and the Department of Justice for the exact same reason. So, yes, they've achieved the short-term benefit of muddying the waters, but the long-term detriment it does to these institutions that we desperately need is something that the country is going to have to deal with.
And Brad, as a former FBI agent, you just heard Matt say that this really muddies the waters. But what is the long-term damage, if any, to the FBI as well as the Department of Justice?
Well, the long-term damage is credibility, because you're only as good as people talking to you and your relationships both with allies in the country as well as overseas. If you took this at face value, it certainly comes across as really sloppy work, which I guarantee you is not the case. So the FBI will continue on. They're probably angry, discouraged, but determined. This story will continue on. That's the one thing we can for sure agree on. Matt Dowd, Brad Garrett, we thank you very much for your analysis on this Saturday morning.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.